Hello, everyone. My name's Martin Bose. I am the co-host of the On the Fly podcast, and we want to welcome you to this exciting new opportunity for sharing casual conversations around coaching youth lacrosse. I'll be joined by my co-host, Joey Picard, and we both have a long history of coaching and teaching this game that we're so passionate about, and we wanted to make something particular for youth lacrosse coaches, administrators, and families. This podcast is powered by Massachusetts Youth Lacrosse, and we're excited to share this content with you each and every week. Enjoy.
I'm Joey Picard. I'm joined by Coach Martin Bose. We're doing an episode on keeping all kids engaged. One of, if not the biggest challenges that youth coaches face is putting together a practice plan that keeps all kids engaged. And of course, we're talking about having a wide array of skill sets, sharing the field, participating in your drills together. On one hand, you're going to have your brand new kids, or some kids that maybe you've had a while, but they're still in the developing stage. They might struggle with the eye-hand coordination. They tend to be a little awkward, maybe with their bodies, possibly slower than some of their peers. And I think we all know who we're talking about, and their inconsistencies with the basics can kind of bring your drill to a crashing halt. I think all coaches have experienced this. On the other end of the spectrum, you have some of these kids who are elite level. Maybe they play club. They're not only consistent, but they're dominant. And they have natural athleticism, possibly a tremendous IQ. They tend to absorb every nuance or strategy that you can throw at them. Of course, in the bell curve, Coach Bose, as we're talking about the bulk of our players, the vast majority of these kids are somewhere in between. They certainly demonstrate skills, but perhaps not as consistently as our studs or as infrequently as our novices. So how can you, as a coach, create an environment wherein all players can thrive, all players can improve, all players can contribute to the team, and at the end of the day, and this is ultimately what we want, all players leave your practice field with a huge smile on their face? I very seriously doubt that Coach Martin Bose has a one-sentence answer to this problem. I don't think anyone does. So we are excited to talk through the obstacles that we face, the ideas and strategies we can implement to get the most out of a wildly diverse group of players. I think we should start with quick introductions. So Martin, why don't you give us your 20-second bio? And while you do that, I'm also going to give you an icebreaker question, something that I'll answer as well. So after you tell us a little bit about your background, who you are as a person and a coach, tell us, is there a bigger challenge in coaching than having a varying degree of skill sets?
Well, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate the intro. My name is Martin Bose. I am blessed to be the Lacrosse Education Director for Massachusetts Youth Lacrosse. So I mostly focus on coach education as well as player development year-round. I also played for a number of years, was lucky to play professionally for 8 years with the Boston Cannons and Florida Launch. Before that, I played for the University of Hartford, and I grew up in Quincy, and that's where I played my high school ball. So been around the game for a long time. Since the end of college, I started my coaching career mostly focused on player development, and that slowly turned into coaching coaches. And I've been really, really profoundly interested in the art of coaching, because if we can positively affect a coach, that can potentially be hundreds of kids that we positively affect. So I'm really, really excited to try to put some positive content out there through a podcast like this, and I'm excited to work with someone like yourself. Yeah, hopefully people get value from this, and we can build on it and receive feedback on what people want to hear about. So excited to be here, excited to talk about this topic in particular, because as I've embedded myself in this role, there is not a more common through line for coaches is this challenge of coaching to this scale of skills and scale of different experience levels. Sometimes it's not just about the skill, it's also about the bought-in factor. Some kids, maybe they're not the most skilled, but they really are good listeners. And so there's a whole spectrum of things that might pop up for coaches that are consistent. And so I would say to any coach that feels like, oh, this is something I struggle with, you're not alone. This is a very consistent through line that we see.
Amazing. And it's my honor to join you as well. Joey Picard, as I mentioned, I'm entering my 21st year as a youth lacrosse coach. Currently, I sit as Director of Operations for Duxbury Youth Lacrosse, which is one of the oldest youth programs in the Commonwealth. I've served as Director of Operations for Massachusetts Youth Lacrosse, and right now my wife and I are the game schedulers for Mass Youth Lacs as well as Town Pride Lacrosse League. So pretty much every game from Ashburnham to Newburyport, from Dudley Charlton to Nantucket, we have our hands stamped on that a little bit. And I'm really excited to talk to you about all things lacrosse. And this is a great topic as well, because I'm currently a parent coach as well, and I absolutely deal with this. So this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest, if not biggest, the biggest challenges that we face as coaches. Good topic to start off with. So as you mentioned in your very impressive bio, you've coached this, you've played this sport at the highest level. I'm willing to bet you that for most of your time, you've been one of the top players on your team at Quincy, at Hartford, maybe with the Cannons as well. But has there been a time, before we get into the coaching aspect, I want to put our player caps on for a second. Has there been a time in lacrosse? And if the answer is no, you've always been a stud. Maybe it's in another sport or activity that you've tried. Is there a time when you were on the other end of that spectrum, maybe behind your peers in the development?
Absolutely. Many scenarios growing up, but just to keep it on the sport topic, the easiest example would be my early years at Hartford, right? My freshman year in particular, I didn't really know what to expect. I actually walked onto the team, so I was not heavily recruited by any means. And yeah, I was at the bottom of the depth chart for sure early on. And then again, I experienced that at the pro level. I was the last pick in the draft in 2012. And so, joining those practice sessions with the Boston Cannons, I didn't even sniff the field, so I had some growing to do in order to earn some playing time. So definitely a near and dear thing. And, you maybe talk to some guys I played with, and I never made stud status, in some regards. So I thought I did well. I had a good career, but, I was always kind of grinding, always like, waiting for that email on Tuesdays, like, did I make the roster this week? Right. So I can relate to those players that feel like they're trying to play catch up for sure.
So just playing with people who are better than you, and maybe even significantly, and I'm not saying that's the case with you, but does that help you or does that hurt you?
Depends on your mindset. I think objectively it helps you, but there are certainly some detrimental mindsets that it can be hurtful if you're able to avoid the pain of always comparing yourself and keeping your ego out of the equation and noticing what is working for one player, and trying not to turn that into, well, that means this, that means that I'm this and they are that, well, what's working for them, and let me try that. And so I think objectively, it is extremely helpful to be around players that are better than you. And so instilling a mindset that sees the value in that, I think, is the biggest hurdle.
And you're approaching that from high school, collegiate, professional level, mature, 20s, 30s even. We got to put ourselves in the mindset of a 10-year-old. And I think this is what's great about this platform and this idea for a podcast. This is where the coaches come in, right? And this is where the coaches can help an impressionable young boy or girl deal with what you call that detrimental mindset. And so thinking back to your playing time, is there a coach, or not by name, but maybe a coaching strategy that made it easier to kind of keep up with the others? And on the flip side, also answer, is there something that hindered you from a coaching perspective?
There is a particular coach that comes to mind, and he was actually my high school basketball coach. And I use this to this very day, particularly for the younger groups. And that is to out-energize your team at the beginning of practice. This is critical because to go right into like, okay, who are the better players? Who are the worst players? That instantly creates a divide. If I have the ability to engage my whole group with my energy as the coach, I can allow them to match me, which then allows me to actually take a step back with my energy and start to be more observant of the skill sets of the players that I have. So if I go right into like an evaluation mindset as a coach, I think that's a mistake. I think the number one thing to at least at the start of any practice session would be the engagement of the energy itself, and to create like that excitement of like, we're here, like, let's go. And to create that, maybe it's a game that you like to start with. Some people like to take a lap around the field with their kids, maybe get right into stick work, maybe getting right into stretching. But regardless of what you start with, your energy level as the coach is actually it's absorbent. They can feed off of that in a way that will set you up for success and allow you to actually dial back your energy to start to be more observant into, okay, what do I have from a skill perspective, and based on what I want to do today, how should I play my cards.
What I also love about that is that it doesn't take a sophisticated skill set to be energetic. So you can get brand new kids who can match that, and you can pull that out of them. So I really love the concept of kind of starting there as well. And then you can evaluate, but anybody can do that with the right attitude, right?
Absolutely. And then to answer your second question about, what would be, your don'ts.
Right.
I alluded to it a little bit of like getting right into the evaluation. And I won't say to never do this, but I certainly wouldn't start with breaking off the better players with the new players. Don't do that to start. There are times, and I think I'll be able to go into details when that really does make sense to allow those, let's call them club players, to be in their own drill and allow those novices to be in their own space. But I wouldn't start that way. You want to create that cohesion, that team environment, and allow the energy of the group to be the focus, as opposed to the separation of who's got the more advanced skill set.
So you and I are going to spend a lot of time in the future talking about practice planning. But just to set the table for this conversation, let's just take a minute to qualify what success looks like. And so, in your opinion, quick answer to this: what makes a drill successful?
Quick answer is everyone's moving. Everybody is, you could say the word engaged, but minimal standing around, and effort. If you can see effort out of the majority, if not all of your players, that is a successful drill. And there's obviously levels to this. And I work with individuals at higher levels. And obviously I work with coaches and players, but it's like, if you're to maximize a drill, if you're going to be, what's the best case scenario? I consider that sort of a level of flow state, right? You have individual flow state, someone who's playing their absolute best and they're kind of they're playing their best at that moment, but there's also a group flow state. And so that is sort of what I'm striving for as a coach, is I'm looking to find the flow state of a drill, and that A looks like everyone giving effort, and then B leveling up the execution of what we're actually trying to do. But it's a B, meaning I don't even need to worry about that at the beginning of a drill or even at the beginning of a season, right? And for those younger age groups, the K through twos and the third and fourth graders, I really just care about the effort. The execution of it is going to come with the third and fourth week of them experiencing that drill, and then we can get into, hey, when we get into this scenario, let's try to make this decision instead of that decision. But all too often, I see coaches trying to coach technique, and it really is a criticism. Hey, no, you got to do it like this, not that. And they didn't encourage the effort that they were giving. And so we really need to make sure that we prioritize the encouragement of effort, especially for these young kids. They should be, like you said, leaving practice with a smile on their face. And that does not happen if they're not in an environment where they feel encouraged.
And then as a follow-up to that, what makes for a successful practice? Is it all of those drills come together to do that? Or does it just take one great special one and a couple of them can fail and that's still okay?
Yeah, I think a lot of them can fail. And I think it's key that one of the last things that happens is a fun game. You could have a terrible start to practice, a terrible belly of practice, but if you finish off with a fun game that everyone did get involved in, and everyone was trying hard and everyone left, I think that still is a good practice. Maybe you could argue when you get to like the fifth, sixth grade or the seventh, eighth grade select level, yeah, maybe you're being a little bit more cognizant of seeing those skills that you are focused on be executed and developed. I just don't think it's that important at the younger ages. If we're trying hard and people are having fun, that's a successful practice.
And end on a great note. I love that. I really
Yeah,
do.
to finish like that, right.
That's the lasting impression that they have. And mom and dad asked them in the car, how was it? It was a blast. The rest of it could have totally been a bummer, but you end on a positive note, good game, something to go home and remember by. You can't wait to come to the next one. So now we're putting our coach hat on, right? And we are planning out our practice. So a lot of times people will follow a formula, they don't have to, but you're looking before your practice a couple hours ahead of time. to plug in some drills. So coaches will go on YouTube, or maybe this is a good opportunity for you to talk about the LMS that Mass Youth Lax is doing. One way or another, we're looking at a library of drills and figuring out, what do I plug in? So my question is this, and take it where you want. When you're planning these, what's your target participant in your head? Is it the top, the middle, the bottom? Do you kind of have that internal dialogue? No, that's going to be too hard for players X, Y, and Z. Or in the inverse, players A, B, and C, they're probably going to be kind of bored with this. So does that dictate to you, Coach Bose here, what you're putting into your practice plan?
We briefly interrupt this episode to remind you all about the New England Youth Lacrosse Convention. This upcoming convention is the 4th annual. We'll be hosting at Gillette Stadium, and we're super excited. The date for that is February 1st, and we'll be welcoming coaches from all around the country with tons of different speakers and vendors joining us. We hope you'll join us too. Please check out the Instagram page for more information and to gather tickets as well. That's NE Youth LaxCon on Instagram. One more time, that's NE Youth LaxCon on Instagram. Hope to see you there. Great question. Appreciate the plug as well. So for those that don't know, we have an LMS, meaning learning management software. We're calling Learn to Coach Lax. This is a free software for all MYL members, and we're going to be launching a paid version for any youth lacrosse coach out there that would like to get access. So more on that later. To answer your question, the way I think about this is I am going to take whatever drill I'm doing, and I'm going to be able to cater it to the novices, the intermediates, and the advanced without giving them a different drill. And I think this is what I try to teach to coaches, and it's one of the hardest things too. And so I think we'll come back to this topic time and time again. But to try to simplify it for this question, what I do is I have a framework of pressure versus footwork. Okay, so on the y-axis, you have pressure. On the x-axis, you have footwork. So what does that mean? If I have a drill, as an example, of learning how to catch, everybody's got a ball in their stick, and we're going to do these little flips to catches. It's one of the first drills I do, whether it's a learn to play clinic or an advanced session with a high school or college team. You wouldn't imagine the faces I get when I ask college players to do this, the eye rolls. Yet as I make it more advanced for them, they're not able to do it as well as they maybe think that they can. So pressure versus footwork. If there is zero pressure and I'm standing still, that would be the easiest and most simple version of the drill. So if I'm doing this little flip to catch, I'm standing still and I don't have any pressure on me. There's no defender. I'm not being timed. I don't have a coach yelling at me, creating that kind of environment of like, come on, like go harder. Like that's actually a form of pressure, right? So I can be a little bit more relaxed with my my voice and my environment that I create. If I have my novices doing the simplest version, without changing the drill, I can simultaneously ask my advanced players to start to walk around as they do it, or even start to throw the ball further in front of themselves so they have to run to go make that catch. So what did I just do? I just challenged them on the footwork perspective a little bit, right? And so take a skill, take a drill. I have a way to progress or regress that drill on that within that framework. And so that is my approach, is I'm going to really, I guess to answer your question directly, I'm going for that intermediate group, knowing that I have the tools to challenge those advanced players and simplify for those novices. So it's the same drill, it's the same focus, but there's a spectrum of difficulty at play.
I think that's spot on. That's exactly what I like to do as well. I think that probably encompasses the best approach to deal with this on a grand scale. There are other ways too, and I'm excited to ask you to give us more examples of, I'll give you a drill and you can tell me ways you can make it a little bit more complicated for some, a little bit more simplified for others. But I want to talk for a quick second about how you communicate that. When you're setting up this drill, when you have your 20 kids that are lined up and looking at you, what are we doing next? Is that something that you're kind of getting in front of and saying, you and you are going to do this and you guys are going to do this? Or are you a little bit more subtle, pull them aside? Talk me through a little bit of the communication of how you are kind of customizing this for each individual player.
Yeah, great question. I'm definitely giving everyone the same directions to start. I'm going to let that happen for a couple of reps, let's say, could be as little as 30 seconds worth. And then I'm going to, as I walk around, hey, I want you to do this, where you throw it out in front of yourself. And then I'll go over to the player that's really struggling. Hey, let's slow this down. Or I want you, in this example with the flipping to catch, I want you to throw the ball higher, because that gives you more time to get the stick to the position that we're actually trying to get it to. A lot of times people will, they'll rush and they'll throw it, and maybe because they're newer, they don't know how to get the ball higher up in the air, and so they throw it up to their head, and it's already like they're jumbled. So hey, by you throwing it higher, you're actually making this drill easier for yourself, because you have more time to get that stick in the position that we want. As I'm walking around, I'm seeing the players that are rolling their eyes, and they're starting to goof off because they think this is so easy. And so I'm going to say, I will do this out loud. Maybe I won't single out a particular player, but I'll say, hey, if this feels easy for you, I want you to throw it out 5 yards in front of yourself, so you have to run to go make that catch. Almost 90% of the players will drop it on their first try of actually, challenging themselves in that way. So depending on the drill itself, I may be a little bit more subtle about it, but the players are noticing what's going on around them. So I don't try to hide. Oh, I'm going to make this more challenging for them, but I don't want them to know about it, because that would just be naive. They're going to notice, but that's okay. I think they're noticing that anyways, right? And so that also gives those novice type players to be like, all right, when I get this, I already know I'm going to start walking a little faster. I'm going to start tossing it out in front of myself, but let me start here and get this down first.
I love that answer. This is what I'm so excited about this podcast, because I myself am going to learn things like this. For example, putting it out there to say, hey, if this feels easy for you, then do this, kind of puts the onus on them. And now you take your intermediate group, and now they start to get challenged as well. They say, hey, I'm in that group. This is easy for me. That's a really remarkably cool way of doing that. So I love that answer. I can either have you give me examples of drills that or I could throw them at you either way. But let me
Yeah.
take the most famous drill, the line drill. I think every coach at some point utilizes a line drill at either the beginning of your practice. I use it a lot on game day. It is a great way to just get a ton of reps in a short amount of time. And for those of you who might not know, we're just talking a point A to point B. One teammate throws it to the other, follows their pass, gets behind, and this is just a constant repetition of passes. You can do ground balls. How would you take a group of kids in a line doing a line drill and notice some kids are just dropping it, some kids are maybe a little frustrated by it? What ways can you customize the line drill?
This is an awesome question. This is an awesome example, because obviously most coaches know exactly what this is. Before I answer the question, I will just say I tend to do a throwback line drill instead of a traditional line drill where you've got point A, point B. I tend to have the line at point A and a cone at point B, so that the player is actually going to run out to that cone and throw it back, or scoop it on their way to that cone and then leave it on the ground on the way back. I think it makes it easier for one coach to run, to work with a bigger group. You can have several of those lines set up. There's less, areas for the ball to kind of disappear on you, right?
Well, good wrinkle.
So throwback line drill, I really tend to start and stay there, as opposed to a traditional line drill. But I think this is a great example, because you can see how it would make sense in certain scenarios to let the more advanced players be in a line together and let the novice players be in their own line together. But there's also a scenario where you just let them mix it up, where there's novice and advanced players and intermediate players in each line. And so why is that important? Because the language and the communication to the advanced players is critical. If we're always allowing them to go off and do their own drill, I think you're doing a disservice to them, and you're doing a disservice to your novice players as well. So how do we communicate to our more advanced players how they can add more value to our novice players? This concept would be an example where I am going to ask those club players to bring it in, and I'm going to be a little bit less subtle about only talking to them about this. And as I bring them in, I'm going to talk to them about leadership and how the first stage of being a leader starts with being a great teammate. And so what does it mean to be a great teammate? It means to help your teammates get better. And that is going to be not getting mad at them when they drop the ball, not avoiding passing to them because they're going to drop the ball. We don't want to confuse them and have them start being a coach, and kids can get overwhelmed with that. But I think there's so much value in a newer player getting a pass from an older player, dropping it, and having, not older but more experienced, a more experienced player going, hey, that's all right. Try to keep your stick up. You're gonna keep trying. You might drop the next one too, but I'm gonna keep throwing you the ball, right? That does a lot for a player. So depending on which scenario you go into, am I going to keep everyone all jumbled up, or am I going to separate and say, hey, let me get my players who have been playing for more than 4 years. You're going to be in these two lines. If you're brand new first year, why don't you come over here? And so let's use that example. We got a line drill going. We got a little bit of a separation of skill. In that novice line, we are going to go slower. You don't need to do a different drill, but we are going to move a little bit slower and allow them to focus on the position of their hands, to focus on the footwork of dropping that knee and really getting your both butts to the ball when you scoop. Whereas the advanced players, I'm going to ask them to move faster, right? Just that simple spectrum of the difficulty of footwork. But we can also, depending on the age level, ask that more advanced lines to start to mix in more weak-handed techniques, some behind the backs, some twisters, some backhanders. If that sounds like a ridiculous thing to ask your first and second graders, I promise you it's not. That is becoming normal. To have an array of different throwing techniques on your strong hand is actually arguably fundamental now. You don't need to be symmetrical. You don't need to do everything on your weak hand that you do with your strong, but you do need to learn what a behind the back pass is. It has function. You do need to know how to do a face cradle and throw a backhander or a twister. And I think that you can absolutely teach that to novice first and second graders. I've done it before, but you don't do it on week one. Allow them to get the footwork, allow them to get used to getting a ball thrown at their face and not freaking out. And so that's going to be something where, yeah, maybe they do notice those older kids are doing different drills and, oh, that looks cool over there. But I'm simultaneously walking back over to that novice line and I'm going, hey, I know they're doing cool stuff over there, but I promise you, if you can just focus on this right now, we'll get there, And so I don't avoid it. I don't just pretend it's not happening. I use it as a tool to encourage and motivate.
So you have started to broach the idea of starting to segregate players for certain areas. You mentioned earlier never really starting with it. So a lot of our warm-up drills, our technique and conditioning drills, they're doing it together. I imagine you're going to say the same thing for the games at the end. Are there other times when you feel like it is appropriate to segregate by ability? And how often?
Yes, and I think that there are, just like that last example, let's say a keep away drill as another example. A lot of these are, you could go either way. You could separate the
Martin,
advanced play.
your camera just came off for me, so I just want to make sure we get that. There it goes. Back on.
So a keep away environment, which is kind of a type of a game, could go either way. I could separate, the advanced players, or I could, mix them up together. So that's another one where it does make sense. I think, scrimmage type games in general, it really doesn't make sense to separate. You really want to have a mix of the more experienced and less experienced players on both teams. So I typically don't separate by experience unless it is a stick work or like technique specific drill. So maybe it's like a shooting on the run, a dodging and feeding type of drill, an offensive focused drill where I might have players of all ability levels at my station, but I'll just have a line over here and a line over here, because the reality is those more experienced players will be able to get 10 reps when those newer players only got 5 before we do that ball hunt. And that's totally okay, right? Yeah. Just because they're moving faster, they've already done this before, they've gotten some coaching. So I don't think there's too many scenarios where you should be trying to separate them unless it is stick work or like a specific technique. Otherwise, I think it makes more sense to mix that up.
And you alluded to this when you said, I think you had if you've been playing for 4 more years, come over here, kind of a little bit of a cut and dry way of segregating them, which I like. And I wanted to add to that, one of the dangerous things we do is we kind of self-evaluate right on the spot. And I'm guilty of it when I want two kids to come up and demonstrate something. I kind of scan across. I'm looking to see which two kids can handle this drill. And I look at all the little faces that I didn't pick. And so this is something that's hard for me for sure. When we do, and we don't do it often, when we do segregate on my teams by position, one thing that I like to do is we give them a challenge to start. So for example, if I have 30 kids, which I do, I'm going to put them in pairs of partner passing, and we give them a challenge: 30 passes without dropping, 20 strong, 10 weak. If you start, if you drop it, you start over. First 5 teams to complete it, you're going down and doing this station over here. Second 5 here. So that way it gives them a little motivation. It's not coach selected. I'm not picking my favorites. I'm not opening myself up to the politics of it, or at least the impression of it. And it's kind of giving them some motivation. I see their faces light up and they want to be the ones. So they grab a partner and they do it. And then it changes practice to practice. So I think it's important for a coach to kind of have some sort of black and white method of doing it, as opposed to the you, and you. You kind of agree with that?
I do. I like that a lot. I have not tried that before. I think that's a great idea. I do try to avoid the give me my advanced players over here. For me, I tend to go, hey, raise your hand if you've been playing for 4 or more years. And then I look at who's got their hand raised, and I will go, okay, you, and you go over there, because I'm already watching and I'm noticing. I love that, something that's basically just a built-in way to create that. I'm going to try that. So yeah, I do try to avoid, hey, if you stink, go to the beginner station, right? Obviously, we don't want to do that. So exactly. And it's very easy to just go, hey, who's in their first or second year playing? It's like, and sometimes those kids, they're actually pretty athletic and they're figuring it out, and they really do, belong in one of the more advanced groups. And so that's the coach's discretion. It also depends on what you're trying to do with that group. But as a blanket statement, I mean, I really do try to limit how much I do that at all. And so I think it's a little bit more subtle in my example of the shooting station. Like, my groups are both, but at each station, at any given drill, I have the ability to, give those more experienced players the opportunity to go through the drill several times, where those newer players are going through a couple of times.
So you had already talked about, and I loved it, and you mentioned leadership. That's what we're teaching our advanced players. So I kind of have a sense of what you're going to say, but how'd you like to do a little improv?
Sure.
A little role play. I want to create a scenario. You're the coach. All right. I'm one of your players and I'm one of the strong ones. Right. Love the sport. I play it every day. Sticks in my hand all day long. I'm in a game. We're coming down, and one of my teammates, who is new to the sport, clearly struggles at practice. He's wide open on the crease. And I look at him and I make the decision, you know what? I'm going to throw it to my buddy over here, who I know can pass and catch, but he happens to be guarded. So I'm trying to thread the needle. Doesn't work out. Turnover. We're all disappointed. I come off the field, right? You're asking me why I made the decision I make. And I announce, kind of rather loudly and emphatically, he never catches the ball at practice. What's the point? What does coach say to me? Let's have that conversation.
First, I would say, you know what, you're right. Let's move away from the group a little bit, so to make sure we're connecting human to human. Yep. This is town lacrosse, right? Our job as town lacrosse players, and my job as a town lacrosse coach, is to make sure everybody enjoys playing lacrosse. And what an awesome opportunity this is for you to help your teammates get better and to help your teammates build confidence. Imagine how it would feel for your teammate to receive a pass from you, even if they don't catch it. Imagine how that would feel for them to see the eye contact and to see that ball coming their way. Man, wouldn't that be a good feeling for them? Don't you think that would be a good feeling for them?
Yeah,
little Joey
probably would. Yeah, I get
right?
it.
So, hey, and I know you, hey, you know what? Your teammate that you wanted to throw it to, he's a good player. I would want to throw it to him sometimes too. But do you get to pass to him at your select practices and your club practices? Right? That's not what this is. And so I want you to understand that, hey, I appreciate you being honest with me. And objectively, you're right. But this is an opportunity for us to grow as a team and for you to grow as a teammate and to become a better teammate. And guess what? As you start to go up in the levels and you start to think about playing high school and maybe even college lacrosse, coaches will notice players who can make others better. And so if we can work on that skill here, it's going to help you across all the other teams that you play for. Sound good, buddy?
Coach, I'd run through a wall for you. You know that? That's awesome. That's
Get
exactly
back
right.
out there and go throw the ball away.
That's spot on, man. That's exactly what town is about. So we have a part 2 here, which is a couple of questions that came in that we're going to answer. But is there anything else to kind of wrap this up that I didn't kind of prod you? I didn't ask you that you want to mention as it relates to this topic of keeping all kids engaged. Did we miss anything?
We probably missed a lot. This is a topic that we will continue to come back to. As I mentioned to start, this is the number one issue that coaches face across the league and probably across the country is, this scale of skills and being able to keep all of your kids engaged regardless of experience level. And what I would say, maybe we didn't really mention, is like, what an awesome opportunity for us as coaches to build leadership in our more experienced players and to build a growth mindset for our novice players. I can't tell you, and I definitely, unfortunately, have several examples of this, how many new players come to this sport, and because they can't catch, they get frustrated and they don't come back next year. And it's like, what a bad reason to stop playing when, guess what? Catching is really freaking hard. Catching is really hard. And this is something that I do at the beginning of practices to help those newer players and help those more advanced, more experienced players gain perspective. I say, hey, of these skills, which do you guys think is the hardest to master? And then I'll list off catching, scooping, shooting, cradling, dodging, defense, cutting. Like, which do you guys think is the absolute hardest to master? And very rarely will someone say catching, because there's a belief that we have. It's like the first time we catch, I got it, right? I know how to catch now. And it's like, well, to come back to that spectrum of footwork versus pressure, what's the most advanced version of a skill? Well, that's when you're running full speed and under pressure. So has anyone here watched college lacrosse? Has anyone here watched professional lacrosse? Does the ball ever end up on the ground? Yeah, it does. Why? Because catching's really hard, especially when you're running full speed and under pressure. And so if the pros are still dropping the ball because of how challenging it is, guess what? It's okay if you do it too. And what I want to see is I want to see you continue to attempt to get open, to continue to make eye contact. I really, really try to coach towards behavioral goals as opposed to results-based goals. And we can talk about that on another episode. But to give them that perspective of like, hey, catching is hard. Whether you're new or not, you're going to drop the ball sometimes. And so I want to continue to see effort. And that's where I really gear my coaching towards cutting. If I can see a player cut to get open, that's something I can say good job and encourage, even if they end up dropping the ball. So I would say for coaches, what an awesome opportunity it is to have this problem. And you're in this position, if you're still listening to this podcast, you're in a position where you have influence over what you guys are going to do at practice. You have influence over the experience of these young kids. And what an awesome opportunity we have. And I thank you for coaching. Let's try to tackle this problem each and every time we hit the field. You don't, similar to my point about catching, you don't just figure this out and now you got it. It's like we have to figure out this kind of scale in this way of challenging players appropriately every drill, every practice. Well, I'm sure we missed some things. I'm sure there's going to be important points that we can come back to. I feel strongly that this is something that a lot of people deal with because we know. And yeah, what an awesome opportunity for us to have this problem.
So some of our future discussions, which I'm so excited for. This has been great. Some of our future discussions are going to be live. We're going to be able to field questions from youth coaches in real time, but some like this one are going to be pre-recorded. And so we've asked a few of our fellow coaches to kind of give us some questions in advance that we can answer. So we have a few. So I think this is a good time to ask a couple of them on behalf of inquiring minds. So here are some. Here's the first one. For my team, the problem seems to be more with the parents than the players themselves. We hear more from the parents about their child being bored with town lacrosse because the other kids can't pass and catch. So what are some ways that we can combat that mentality?
Yeah. And Yeah, it's very common. It's the kid that's rolling their eyes when you say, "Hey, we're going to do this simple catching drill," and they feel bored because, to be quite frank, they're getting higher level coaching at their club practice, and so they look at their town practice as a burden, and it's unfortunate. It really is. And so, if you're a parent, maybe you're a coaching parent, maybe you're just a parent of a player that does play club, and also for their town program, I really, really would want to lean into this concept of learning how to become a better teammate as a foundation to becoming a better leader. Um, Having the ability to show up to a practice where players are not as skilled and still give as much effort as you can is more valuable than any of the skills you're getting at club. And so teaching a parent what I just said and the profoundness of a player actually executing on that, um, is another incredible challenge. There's no easy answer for this because in a lot of cases the parents feel a certain way about it. And if I'm like, hey, would you be willing to change your mind about this, and they say no, there's only so much I can do, right? But the reality is it really is a great opportunity for players to learn how to continue to give effort. And maybe that effort isn't just about running as hard as you can. The effort can be more about, are you staying focused and engaged, and are you trying to add as much value to your team as possible? And that value in this instance isn't about being the one who's got the ball in their stick and doing everything. It's about communicating with a teammate and allowing them to make a mistake without feeling like they stink and feeling like you're still connected as teammates. That's an important life lesson, and that's the beauty of sports. We learn these life lessons in an environment, in kind of in a vacuum environment, because it's very frustrating to play sports for all parties involved. And so the other thing I would say, and I typically ask the parents and players this, like, what are your expectations? Are you showing up to town practice with the expectation that everyone is supposed to catch every ball? And why? Why do you have that expectation? Because if you're getting frustrated by that, that means you have some expectation it's supposed to go a different way. And so all of the coaching that I end up doing on this topic is really about the mindset of learning how to be more present, learning how to be less about expectations and more about standards. This is something I am very, very passionate about, because a lot of coaches talk about having high expectations, and I try to change that language. Having high standards is a different thing than having high expectations, because having high expectations means they're either going to get met or they're not. And when they don't get met, you think that gives you the right to start barking and giving attitude and getting angry and getting loud at your team because they didn't meet your expectations that you just made up, right? This is for kids. This is for kids to enjoy a sport, and having the perspective of knowing that you're going to have players and parents that don't think they need to be there and don't think that they think that this is below them is another one of those. Hey, what a great opportunity for us to work on our people skills as coaches. And so there's no easy answer, but it really is a case by case thing. But there are a lot of different ways for you to connect with that player and connect with that parent. And I think coaches that take that approach end up creating some real human connection. Because when you go through a problem like this with someone, it can be a bond breaker, but I think it can really be a relationship builder if we go about it with compassion and connection at the center of it.
I don't think this will be the last time we'll talk about that complicated coach
Yeah.
parent relationship. I'm excited to get into that a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I want to just add one more thing, because
Sure.
I was just reading about this. There was a study done on elite athletes and their relationship to their parents. And what they found was top performers through many, many different sports, top performers have parents who are calm and quiet on the sideline, let's say in a game scenario. And I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense, but it's like it's hard to like just ask that. But if you understand the neuroscience behind this, which is basically that every time you go pass, or every time you go shoot, or you go get, do this, you're giving them an instruction. You're taking a decision making opportunity away from them. So it's like, whether they make the right decision or not just let them
It's
have
theirs
it,
to make.
right? It's theirs to make. And so I think, it's a competitive spirit, and like I want to, like, like get involved, and there's positive aspects to parents that are getting into it. But I think understanding, like, hey, if you really do want your child to succeed, you're better off zipping it, and just letting them know that you enjoy watching them play, and that when they look over at you, you're looking back and you're smiling, and you're really there, and you're not trying to dictate how they make decisions on the field, because it really, really is detrimental to their development.
Great add on. Great add on. Here's another one. I have two goalies, same age and level. One is significantly stronger. Not only saves a great deal more, but better with clearing and kickstarting the offense. And whenever we evenly split and run an intra-squad scrimmage, those paired up with the weaker goalie are visibly disappointed. And as coaches, we feel icky about the whole thing, especially the goaltender who clearly knows her teammates don't want to be on her squad. So how do we address it? And you've kind of already talked about this a little bit about character, team, leadership. So
Sure. Yeah, no, that's it's a pretty common one. I think it's a common scenario. I wouldn't say it's super common for the teammates to be visibly icked out. I think that's probably the lowest hanging fruit here, is to understand how to create an environment where a discouraging reaction is something we can control. And I don't really have a great quick answer to this one, but I think that there's another really, really great opportunity to allow the goalie who has more experience to encourage this other goalie. I mean, what a cool way for this more experienced goalie to be able to, put their arm around this other one and say, hey, like, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, we are teammates. It's all right. And for this goalie that's struggling and maybe feels like they're getting judged, hey, that's okay too. If you have the ability to continue to show up and give effort, that is going to get praised. That is going to get noticed, because that's the type of coach that you have. We don't need you to be the best goalie. We want you here because we enjoy playing this sport together. And I mean, hey, if I have to at halftime switch goalies, I mean, that's something I might do, but I'm definitely not going to do it in a way that makes that less experienced goalie feel bad about themselves. I need to get a human connection first and foremost, so that whatever decision I end up making, it has a foundation of trust and respect. If I'm just doing it and I don't really get to know that person, it's so easy for that person to get discouraged and really not want to be there anymore. How can I create a scenario where it's not about everyone winning, but in this case of winning being everyone's having fun? I can't do that without a level of trust and a level of connection, so that when I do make decisions, they trust it in my decision, that it's in their best interest. It's a good question. It's a tough scenario, but man, what an opportunity to see. As a coach, X's and O's is so irrelevant in this conversation. Me knowing exactly how to teach goalie technique is not the answer. Yes, is that going to be helpful in me developing that newer player? Absolutely. But I think really more than anything, this is about trust and human connection.
I think there's a band-aid for a quick fix that I'm going to interject, but I
Please.
will say that you hit the overarching bigger problem which heals the wound, which is the team culture and the mindset, which is really important. But a quick fix to this that I have utilized, because I've been in somewhat of this scenario, is if you're going to do an inter-squad scrimmage, goalie stays with the net. One's in the north, one's in the south, and at halftime they switch. So each team has an opportunity to be with each goalie and take that
Right.
crap
Instead
out.
of having the goalies jog across the
Yeah.
field. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we keep one on this side, one here, switch side at halves. Everyone has an opportunity to play with everyone in that aspect. That's a band-aid, though. I think really you nailed the idea of the team culture has to kind of change their mindset on that. So kudos for that. And again, we'll be talking about all these things because these are recurring problems, as we know. How about one more?
Sure.
I have a few, but we're going to cut this down a little bit. Every year, a handful of bubble players miss out on the select team. And for every kid that's mature enough to be motivated by it, work harder, maybe even prove us wrong, it seems like there are two or three of them that simply check out and give up on themselves. I feel like we're saying all the right things, but in one ear and out the other. It's not the most enjoyable part of the job. Not really a question in there, but I think that's something that all of us at fifth grade and higher, when we have select team, when we have A and B, when we
Yeah.
have club and not, we kind of deal with the rejection aspect.
Yeah.
We've been balanced this idea of, hey, this is town, it's different, but there still is the reality of there's human beings involved.
This is a common scenario, like you said. That my first reaction to that is to help them understand. For the athlete that gets cut and is pissed, them being able to have a coach tell them, "Are you upset by this?" Clearly, they are. Right? Yeah, this sucks. Right? That means you care. Let's just start with let's just start with that foundation. Again, I've got the trust of this kid. I'm connected to them. They trust me. That means you care. That is the best news that we could get. You care enough to be disappointed by this result. So now what are we going to do about it? This is what my mom always used to say if I was upset. So what are we going to do about this? Right? And not in a like, well, it's in a compassionate way, right?
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it together. It's a team. It feels like we're going to do it together. Yep, some players are motivated by that naturally. They're disappointed and they go and they work at it. And then the player that is checking out because of it, we have to really, really work as coaches to maintain that connection, because that's basically what's happening is we're losing that connection. They care enough to be upset, but they don't care enough to keep giving effort and keep showing up. So yeah, what do we do? If there's a player that's just on the classic team, they really, really wanted to make select, and now they're showing up to classic practice and they've got terrible body language. That is the first thing, and that is the thing that I'll keep coming back to is while they are showing me poor body language, the last thing that I want to do is call them out in front of everybody. I don't do that. Hey, why aren't you trying? Oh, you think just because you didn't make the team, you're not going to try now? Maybe you're coming from a good place. It's not going to land. It's not going to land. So that's where we have to be. I'll use the word gentle or really compassionate. Like I'm going to go up to that person. I'm going to say, I know you're pissed that you didn't make that team. And I can tell because you're upset, and that means you care, right? That's a good thing, right? I know you care enough because you're upset, right? So what are we going to do about this, right? We're going to focus on this drill right now. Hey, I'm telling you right now, if you can focus on this drill right now, that's going to create positive momentum. What's the more powerful force in life than momentum? There's nothing. So if I can create a little bit of momentum for that player to feel like I'm getting better, I've done my job as a coach. Because as soon as they feel like, because they didn't make this team, more likely than not, they have now created a mindset of a fixed, I am not good at this. So my job is now to shift their thinking to a growth mindset and to think, if I can just get them a little bit better in this drill right now, I've done my job and I can start to build on that momentum. Any little bit of effort I can encourage, right? I can be encouraging for the smallest little bit of effort, right? There's just countless studies done on like, if I say 5 things to you and 4 of them are criticizing and 1 of them is encouraging, I'm going to lose you, right? It needs to be the other way around.
Yeah.
Minimum 3 positive to 2 negative. And it's like, I think we as coaches can make the mistake of correcting. Oh, we got to fix that. We got to fix that. We got to fix that. And it's like, technically you can build to that as a coach, but not if you don't have everyone bought in first. And you're not going to get that unless you create an encouraging environment first. And for those kids that feel like they're on the bubble and they just missed out on something, you're losing them. So what are you going to do about it, coach? Right? Oh, you got to connect with them first. You got to make them feel seen. How do I make them feel seen? Validate. I know you're upset about this, right? And then we can build on it because clearly they care. If they're upset, they care. And so that in and of itself is a positive. And I know I'm repeating myself, but yeah, if I can create a little bit of positive momentum for that player, I think I can get them back.
So you agreed to coach youth lacrosse. Now what? Well, I'll tell you, If you found your way onto this discussion, how about this for a callback, Martin? You care, right? The coaches who are watching this, they care. What a great baseline to come into your spring season, your fall lacrosse, or winter lacrosse. So I, for one, am really appreciative for anyone who's wanting to participate in this discussion, cares enough to coach youth lacrosse. I am so excited to work on this project with you. I want to send a special thanks to Kevin Barney and to Aaron Brogan and all of the folks at Massey Flax for their support as we put this together. I think the possibilities and the discussions are endless. We have some great guests that are going to line up and help us with these roundtable discussions as we tackle all sorts of conversations that are going to hit the plate of a new coach and an experienced coach alike. And it's been a real pleasure and honor talking to you, Martin, about this subject and all future ones. So on that note, I think we'll wrap it up for episode.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Joey. And just as a final remark on my half, within my role for Massachusetts Youth Lacrosse, I'm creating some resources for coaches, as I mentioned earlier, working on a platform. And I'm also available to coaches within the league and outside the league. And it's part of why I helped to create this platform is as a supplement to all youth lacrosse coaches. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all fix, but for coaches that feel like, man, I really need some support. Maybe it's administratively, maybe it's in training your coaches, maybe it's in getting league operations up and running and you're in a different state. But regardless, if you've got a passion for youth lacrosse and you feel like you'd like to work with some professionals, please reach out. I'll make sure that my contact information is in the description of these videos, and I look forward to talking more with you, Joey, and to hearing from you coaches out there that are listening and want to engage with us. So thank you.
Great stuff, Coach. See you soon.
All right. Thank you.